Welcome to the 5-hour Energy Knoxville Nationals. We are here in the Dyer Hudson media room, which is where a lot of the media and photographers and journalists come here to download their stuff and get planning for the night ahead. And I'm joined by the guy that I call the bloke with the spokes. Not too many other people probably even understand that. Brad Doty, how are you, mate?
I'm good. That's an Aussie thing. Yeah, most people don't understand, I guess.
So a bloke is a guy, and you have spokes most of the time.
Pretty easy, pretty simple.
How often do you have commitments rolling into this event, Brad?
Not too much. I really focus on my race, which was a few weeks back. Once I get through that, I kind of breathe a sigh of relief and get to come out here. And I'm not here on any really official business, not part of the TV package. So I do some autograph sessions and relax and enjoy the Nationals.
So personally, traditionally, you are a bit of a worrier. You do think, yes, you do think a lot, and you do weigh up a lot of the things in your mind in advance. That's not an unfair thing to say, is it?
No, I'm trying to get better, but I do. Especially, you work so hard on an event, as you know. You've been there and done that. You work months leading up to an event, and we have 2 days to get it in, but you ask for good weather one day of the year.
Yep.
And you literally work for months. We have a lot of great sponsors, Biologistics, Racing Optics, and so on, that really have been behind us in this race. And you try to take care of all those people and sell tickets at the same time, and just hope that when that day rolls around, the sun's shining.
It seems like with the King's Royal being enormous, one of the biggest that they've ever had, I'm getting a feeling that tomorrow might be the same here, to be honest. It just seems to be a groundswell that this might be another massive event.
Oh, I believe it will. It seems like sprint car racing all around the U.S. is getting bigger. And then obviously with Kyle Larson, he was at our event too, and I've told him, I thank him, and I'm going to thank him publicly again, that he saved our butt probably at our race, because the weather being as bad as it was, a lot of people still showed up knowing Kyle was going to be there. And with him being allowed to run Saturday night, I think it's going to be a blowout in ticket sales.
So you think he has a real saleability?
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. I was in Pennsylvania Speed Week at Path Valley in Lincoln when he and Casey Kane both were there, and I'm telling you, they had people hanging from the fences. They're literally, these are Path Valley's a little track up in the mountains, and they had people everywhere to see those guys, and both of them were so generous with their time before and after the race. And when I saw that, and knowing that Kyle was going to be at our event, there's no doubt it helped us, and I firmly believe it's going to help ticket sales here tomorrow.
I know that it was different back in your day. You didn't have a bunch of crew guys. You probably had your crew chief and maybe a tyre guy.
We called him
like
mechanic back then. But
there you go. But now you think that guys like Casey Kane's a great example. He comes to Australia, he runs down in Sydney with us. He spends his all day, every day in the shop just working on the car. His passion is actually for working on it. So he doesn't have, yes, he has his crew, but he loves that aspect of it. Were you the same in your racing, or did you have to be?
I felt like I had to be. I mean, I had some mechanics early on, but with the Coors Light car, we had some good crew members, but I had the final say on chassis setup and that kind of thing. And I think that's important for a sprint car driver to know that and learn that. I mean, today it's a lot more technical, especially with the shocks.
Yeah.
So you need more or less a shock specialist in sprint car racing nowadays, and it's harder for the driver to be that setup guy or to adjust those shocks. But I think the driver still has to know enough to be able to put some input to the crew chief and saying, well, the car's doing this, it's doing this in this corner, maybe that in another corner, and tell the crew chief, or give them some hints on, I think we need to tie this corner down or soften this corner up. That kind of, it just, overall, I think it helps.
You can't be cold trickle.
Can be what?
You can't be cold trickle.
Cold trickle.
He didn't understand.
I thought this was an Australian term. Okay.
No. Remember, he didn't understand the vocabulary. He said, "I'm an idiot," and Harry said, "That don't make you any different than any driver I ever know, Cole."
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. There are a lot of drivers that just want to get in and drive, and don't know a lot about the race cars. And well, we talked about Kyle Larson. He's getting better. I just talked to Paul Silva a little while ago, and basically he said that Kyle says that's Paul's job. He said it's my job to drive it. So he doesn't have a lot of input.
Yep.
He's getting better, as Paul said, about telling him what the car is doing in certain places. But as far as telling him what shocks or what bars to put in it, he doesn't know that. And even a lot of the top drivers today probably don't know that. But they have to get that feel and know what they want to be able to relay that to the crew chief.
You know, when I come to Knoxville, there's people and things that I see that remind me that I'm here in Knoxville, and I go, there's that familiarity that's nice to feel, you know.
Yeah.
And one of those people is Guy Forbrook.
Yeah.
Whenever I roll in here and I see Guy in the pits getting around doing his thing, I think I'm at Knoxville. There is a guy that is just an icon, in my understanding, of crew chiefs, of just personalities and people around the game. He doesn't make any fuss, but man, it must be. I want to ask you about accessibility and movability and stuff. It can't be easy doing what he's done all these years.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Guy Forbrook is in a wheelchair, and he's very, very sharp when it comes to making horsepower. He's always been good at the engine tuning and fueling, and he runs the valves, adjusts the valves himself. He's very hands-on when it comes to that, but he's got to have good crew members around him to physically reach and do some of the things that he can't do, being from in a wheelchair. If the rear end needs changed,
yeah,
he can get in there and unbolt some of the pieces and parts and help, but to lift the rear end and out, he needs a couple guys that can do that for him, and everybody has to work together. But he's very sharp, you know, mentality with what the car's doing, what the chassis is doing. He was a former sprint car driver himself. Now his accident was in a street car when he was paralyzed. It wasn't a racing accident, but so he's been a driver, so he understands that part of it. He's become a really good crew chief.
When your life changed back in the day, would you have thought at that point or a little later that still after all these years you would be a household name in this sport?
Well, I don't know if I'm still a household. I'm getting older, Wade, but I have to admit that when the TV came along after my injury, about 2 years after my accident, they did the Slick 50 series, live TV, 10 races in a row out in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah. And
I live in Ohio. And they asked me if I wanted to get involved, and I said, spend 3 or 4 days a week in Phoenix, Arizona in the middle of winter? Yeah, I'm in. So I had no formal training with TV whatsoever. They plunked me down in the booth. We went live for the first time, and I'll never forget that feeling. It was as close to the adrenaline rush as driving a sprint car was, and it was really fun. And I was told I was pretty good at it, especially the first time. So we parlayed that into a career in TV, and that's kept me involved. And that's kept my name out there, kept me, you know, like I said, involved in the sport that I love so much. So, yeah, I mean, it makes me feel good too when little kids will come up and ask for an autograph. And obviously, they weren't around when when I was racing, and it's their parents, you know, telling them who I was and what I did and what I might have accomplished and that kind of thing. And that makes me proud.
When I say the word vintage, what does the word vintage conjure up in your mind?
To me, an old has-been.
I'll tell you the reason I asked that is on Instagram, there's a page called Vintage Sprint Cars. And it makes me a bit like, oh, that can't be vintage.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of really cool, like, you know, the Coors Light car, the Kodiak car, you know, that from that era in the 80s through, and it's now called vintage. It makes me sad that they think that, but man, there were some great looking cars then.
I thought so, you know, but yeah, I mean, I'm with you when you think back. It wasn't that long ago. You know,
it was, but it doesn't
really
feel like it.
But it doesn't feel like it, you know. And technically, the cars themselves, the chassis. Somebody just asked me on Twitter the other day, a picture of my Coors Light car, and they said how big the car looked. The car is physically the same size as today's car. The wheelbase is the same. The chassis measurements are the same.
Tanks were bigger.
The tanks were bigger.
Yeah.
And that made the car look bigger. And I pointed that out. You know, that it was the tank is the only thing larger on the sprint car from the 80s than what today's sprint cars are.
It's always great to see you here, mate. It's not the Nationals without seeing the wonderful Brad Doty here. So you only get to pick one. Who's going to win?
Oh man, you know, obviously Donnie Schatz isn't going to like this, but you know, with the era of Steve Kinzer, you know, anybody but Steve, it's good for the sport when other people win. I believe. Obviously, David Gravel's been fast, but that doesn't mean he'll be fast tomorrow night when it counts. So you can't count out Donnie Schatz and Ricky Warner as crew chief, but it's going to be a good battle. I really, I can't
see how he's not answering the question.
Well, and you know what? I'll tell you why. Because if these guys are out there running around in tennis shoes, and all they had to worry about was a shoestring or blowing a tennis shoe, I'd pick one. But when there's a machine involved and the chassis setup has to be right, it's hard to pick.
Yeah, very clever. He could be in politics one day. Very good. The wonderful Brad Doty.